everybody, and welcome. We've really grown up. I think we're on episode 31, HR Breakfast USA. Here we are. And let me, as ever, introduce my fabulous co-hosts and friends, Callie.
Hello.
And Toby.
It's breakfast time. That's my new catchphrase. At 3:30 here in the afternoon in the UK. My neighbours will be kind of going, "What's going on in that shed?"
And just before we came live, we were talking about a brisket. So we're going to have a brisket in Minneapolis, which I am super excited about. My husband will be very jealous about, as he always does a great brisket here for us. I digress. Shall we talk about what we're here to talk about today? We often talk about cultures of continuous learning and how fabulous it would be to work with these mythical organizations who really get it. There are organizations out there who are doing it really well. Toby's got a business that works with some of these incredible human beings that understand it and get it and really do it well. But how do you get to a culture of continuous learning? And where does that start? Callie, let me come to you first, because I'm pretty sure Toby's got a lot to say about this one this week. A lot to say. When we look at those kind of organizations, and you look at some of the companies you've connected with over the years who've done it really well, what's been that common ingredient?
Trust. Go back to last episode. They've created a foundation where employees are okay learning and trying new things, and that's celebrated. And that goes back to trust in the organization and the people making decisions to want to have that investment. I think it's not hard to find people who want continuous learning. It's hard to find companies that create an opportunity where that's valued, supported, and that there's actually time put to that. I think we have a lot of people who are burning themselves out to further their education, to continuously stay on top of information that they need to know to grow and expand. But the companies that actually create an environment that says, hey, we value this, and this isn't just something we want you to do off the clock. We want to support your development as a person throughout your time with the company too. I think that's a lot more rare and an incredible opportunity for organizations that want to have that ability to captivate and maintain their employee population.
I mean, Toby, I don't know what you said, but what she said.
Yeah, good. We'll end the episode there, I think. I've taken me back. I want to actually throw it back to both of you and ask you, outside of work, what does continuous learning mean to you? Like, how do you see continuous learning manifest itself in your day-to-day lives? And I will start with Sam.
Oh, I love the way Callie and I both so what does it mean to me? I mean, I've got a continuous stack of books that I read, podcasts I listen to, YouTube shorts. I get a lot of learning out of YouTube shorts. And then, do I want to dive in even further? And then, I'll have huge chunks of time at the weekends where I might sit down and read for 2 or 3 hours just because I haven't had the time in the week. And I feel bad saying it out loud, right? God, I should be doing half an hour a day. But actually, I do mine in bigger chunks at the weekend in terms of the reading. But during the week, it's the podcasts, it's the shorts, it's the other videos on areas that I want to learn from and new followers and that kind of stuff.
And a follow-up question, and Callie, prepare yourself because the same 2 questions are coming to you, so you better be ready. Why? Why do you do all that continuous learning, Sam?
Number one, I'm curious. I think there's another, and there are 2 other parts to this for me, right? Which is I have a fundamental belief that, my client base, I want them to stay relevant. I want them to get away from talking about the handbooks and policies and procedures. I get it. They're important, right? A company needs to be compliant. But actually building a business and staying in business is harder than it's ever been before. And I'm not just talking about the economy, I'm talking about attracting the right talent, having the right talent with the right skills, and staying ahead. And I always have going through my head, why did the American railroads fail? And I heard it from someone years ago, and it was a game changer for me because they didn't look up. They didn't think about aeroplanes coming along. They were so busy fighting each other. This thing kind of flew over them, and it was game over for them. So that relevance is really important. And Toby, I often talk to you about this. I'm a middle-aged woman, I'm a white middle-aged woman, and it's so easy with this kind of hair to look out of date and just outdated. And I really don't want that for me. One of my coolest friends is 79. She's been 74 for years in my mind. And do you know what she said to me the other day? Do you know what? I can't get my head around Snapchat, but I'm totally cool with Instagram, YouTube, I film on there, and I, this, that, and the other. And I love her so much for that. I want to be her when I'm a grown up.
That is a very, very good answer. So in part, it's, developing yourself in the business, but also to remain relevant in the today's. Okay, makes complete sense. Callie, what does continuous learning mean to you?
I think for me, I get something in my head, and it's important to me that I get as close to that version in my head as possible, which often means learning new things or seeking out new information to make that end vision come to life. And so it's always been driven by curiosity, again, like Sam said, but also of how do I create the best version of this that I possibly can. And that is really reinforcing of learning new skills and finding the connections that you need to. And then you're continuously reinforced when you then find new things that you can then connect and bring in with all of that too. So I think for both of us, it sounds like there's an immense drive internally to be able to continue to move forward and stay relevant, but also just do big things.
Cool. So there are two unique things there that do not happen in the workplace. The first one is no one is centrally managing your learning pathway, your training, curating all the content for you. No one is managing that process. You are actively doing it yourself, which in turn is kind of, as a result, is learning in itself, right? Learning to where to get the best stuff from. So that isn't prohibiting you from finding the right learning. You are continuously learning by default. The other thing is you have an intrinsic motivation that you are able to satisfy by doing that. In a workplace, the opposite of both those things happen. You come to work baked in with this expectation that you want to go to work and continuously learn, but it's always primed as what the employer wants you to do rather than what you want to do as an individual. So there's no motivation to do continuous learning in the workplace, so why bother? And the other thing is it's completely spoon-fed to you and delivered on this conveyor belt of rather dry, grey, stale content primarily that is consumed.
If you even get it at all.
Even if you get it at all, right? But so in short, the worst thing you can do to support a culture of learning is have a learning and development team, because a learning and development team will try and do both those things. They will try and push. They will create content for you that is specific for the business, for the organization, and just deliver this quite not consumer grade stuff. There will be better content that achieves the same objective outside the world of work, hands down. Then the second one is like they won't create that stuff. They'll create stuff that speaks to the employer's motivation rather than the employee's motivation, so no one's motivated to do it. So you're like, well, how do we create an element of continuous learning within our people? Well, like don't like babysit them and make like it has to be about more about conversations and a customer success mindset from an employer's perspective, that you need to empower the people to drive that rather than the employer, the HR team, or anything like that. So by its very nature, the most learning development teams are set up to fail if they try and create a continuous learning culture or a social learning culture. It's like, you ain't the team to do that. You aren't the people to do that. So stop trying. Then there's the second one, is that most companies I've worked with that have under 50 headcount don't have an L&D team, yet they still manage to work and operate and innovate and scale. Every startup doesn't. Oh, okay. So we've got 3 people in the company. Let's make sure one of them's looking after our learning and development. No, the 3 people go into that startup, engage with continuous learning to help the business grow. They have the motivations. They don't have anyone spoon feeding content. They've got to be curious, like you said, Sam, and go out and find that stuff. And as the organization grows and grows and grows, you kind of go, oh, okay, we need someone to look after that now. It's like, no, you don't. Someone has created an industry here, a multi-billion-dollar industry, out of the assumption that that's the best way to do it. And I'm here as an ex-learning and development professional. I used to be employed as a learning and development consultant, telling you that learning development is not a thing you need inside your organization anymore. Goodbye.
The end. I hope you enjoyed this current episode of HR Breakfast USA. And, Callie.
Where my mind goes is the shift toward lean operating. I don't care if your company has 10 people or has 5,000 people. We're stretching people further than probably ever before, while also seeing higher productivity than ever before. I am going to forget the gentleman's name who talked about this with me about a year ago, but I keep thinking about it all the time, and was talking about how running entirely lean might initially make sense from a financial standpoint, but it is the enemy of innovation. And you have to create that breathing room and that opportunity for creativity if you actually want to innovate within your companies. And I think learning is the same way. If you're going to say, even cool, we're going to give you time for an MBA program, right? Like you can do that MBA program. We'll pay for half of it, or we'll pay for all of it, whatever that looks like. But then you don't give any time for that. You've already eliminated 50, 60, 70% of people who might be interested in that, because they simply don't have the capacity outside of their workday to be able to support that. So if you're how do you create an opportunity where people have access to the resources that they need to progress in the ways that actually drives innovation within your organization, assuming that's a goal of your organization? But then how do you really support a balanced system that allows for that time to really be utilized efficiently, and not just a rat race of deadline to deadline to deadline to accomplish it, versus actually taking the time to learn and understand the mechanisms that are at play within the curriculum.
So interestingly, I think the answer, you kind of answered your own question there, because the answer is time and space, the time and space to do it. Yeah. However, given a very busy day and 5-day work weeks and all this kind of stuff, if you give someone the time and space to do learning or creativity or innovation or whatever, probably going to go and do some washing, or probably going to go for a walk, which in itself is that reflective time. But what you end up with is that give someone the time and space. That's the system, right? Give someone the time and space to do continuous learning, and for the love of God, do not do some continuous learning. You've got to call it something that doesn't sound like garbage. But what you need to then do is it's about the intrinsic motivation that it calls to, right? So this is where a customer success mindset in HR really works, because if you have a conversation, believe it or not, with someone and find out what those intrinsic motivators are, and help almost with this sound like a coaching role, point them in the right direction of the stuff they need, and then they'll go and get it, create that desire, create the direction. Don't create the content, don't create the answer. That's just wasted time and effort, because like I say, the internet is quite it has been around for quite a while now. There's quite a lot of content on the internet, so you're probably, and there's lots of other providers who might sell those things, like the answer probably exists out there already, unless it's so unique to your business that you have to then create it internally. But point me at that thing that's so unique and tell me it is like that. Because I think the go-to one, systems and processes. How do I use this tool? Well, 2 things. If you're procuring a tool that is so difficult to use that it needs a 45-minute e-learning module, you're procuring the wrong tool. And the second one is, if you can't use something, what do you generally do? You ask someone who's used it before how to use it. Great. In both of those situations, ain't no learning development manager in that intervention. However, you put a learning and development manager in that situation, and all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, I need to create some learning resources to help this. Like, no, you don't. No one in the world and the history of apps has gone, oh, okay, well, where's the app to help me learn how to use the app? So platform procurement, get that right, and then do away with the mechanics that mean that people don't talk to each other about this stuff. But to your point, Callie, it's time and space, the time and space to do it.
Interesting that, Toby, when you were talking about the fact that, give people the time and space, they might go off and do the washing, they might go for a walk. And, maybe it's because I've been in kind of the business building world for too long. I'm more than happy to, let my people go out, have a walk, do that thinking, if that is what's required to help them with that, whatever we label it, continuous learning. If that's a podcast they need to listen to and take in, if they're going to take that in on a walk, because we all know that sitting at your desk to learn is so hard, because our minds, this is where we work, this is where, we do our jobs. And funnily enough, I was talking to a client earlier about the whole fact that, I'm still an employee. I work for a Mindability. It might be my company, but I'm an employee. And I think understanding that, so as we're helping other teams to get to the point that not only are they continuously learning, but they're doing it in a way that it has impact and it goes in. It's not going to happen in a normal forum. So isn't there an argument to say that, we do a recreational, bad phrase, by the way, okay, bad label, but a recreational afternoon or half day, and that is part of their continuous learning, but we want feedback?
I think it's probably wise, right? So most, not even just manager leaders, that people are afraid of the unknown. So once you say have an afternoon to do some stuff, like the unknown entity of what every single person is doing, how they're exactly spending their time, scares the shit out of people, because it's like, oh, well, are they wasting time? And if they're wasting time, either that's a detriment to me because they're on my team and they're causing me more work, or as a leader, I'm not leading this person right because they're not doing the stuff they should be doing. So I think the whole system of work means that that's very hard to do. Although, in your business club, Sam, you kind of figured this out, right? That just the accountability of saying, I'm going to have an afternoon off, and this is what I want to achieve in this afternoon off. And then you come back and go, did you achieve it? Did you read all that book? Probably not in an afternoon. But did you listen to that podcast? What was it like sharing those insights? And that is, again, that's team leadership, team management, that's collaboration, nothing to do with an L&D team, but creating those opportunities for that to happen. From small to large organizations, Sam, the companies I've worked with in the past 5 years would never do what you said. Only the most forward-thinking business owners and leaders would do that. But it is rarer than a freaking unicorn, that someone would kind of go, oh, don't worry, just go off for the afternoon and read a book or something and do this. It would literally scare the shit out of some of the leaders I've worked with, business owners and leaders within that company, to do that. In fact, I suggested it to one of the leaders at a company I used to work for.
Which goes back to trust.
Look at episode 28 or whatever it was.
30.
30. Was it last week? Was it last week?
It was just last week, Toby. I know a lot's happened since last Monday, right? A lot. But yeah.
But that's what you just described, right? You described a lack of trust and a lack of connection that would allow people to be able to make the right decision that they need to accomplish what that goal is. But we don't cleanly, specifically talk about goals, and we don't create situations of autonomy and trust to say that we understand and respect that our people know how to do this.
which is crazy. Like, it is genuinely crazy.
Yeah.
But it's the redressing of the balance between the employer-employee relationship. Again, this is probably like that's my other catchphrase, other than it's breakfast time. We've got to redress the balance between employee and employer, right? You've got to be able to have a better relationship between those two entities. That is the relationship. Employer, employee. Call it people if you want to call it a people team and all that kind of stuff. Be my guest, but it doesn't change the nature of that relationship. You have to be able to design that relationship with acute awareness that no employee comes to work and goes, "Oh, they're treating me as a person today," because they're not going to treat you as a person. They're going to treat you as an employee. But how does the company define that relationship is really, really important, and that's defined through the end-to-end life cycle of the employee experience. And I think it's just it is it's kind of the element of being able to hide and the doom scrolling, right? Is like quiet quitting. You'll think is like the worst thing to hit since COVID, according to LinkedIn and the Financial Times and Harvard Business Review. Quiet quitting. Everyone's doing it. Watch out. Everyone's quitting. Everyone's quiet quitting. Everyone's quiet quitting. And you're like, okay, well, I can't trust my people now. So it's not even the people that are the problem here. It's the content that's being consumed in the narrative that's out there. Gen Z don't feel inspired by the boomer or millennial workforce. Like, well, okay, so all my Gen Zers aren't working properly. All this kind of stuff is just like stuff you're absorbing, and it's like all you need to do is have a really well-defined relationship between employer and I say all. It's more difficult than that. But you have to do that with design rather than just kind of lazily wading into these assumptions that Gen Z don't want to work. All your employees are quiet quitting. Everyone's super pissed off that we're having to go back to the office. Some people are actually quite happy of going back to the office. But again, all the comms are there kind of going, oh, sorry, folks, but we're all going to go back to the office, yada, yada, yada. It's like all you're doing there is ignoring the conversations with your employees. Or you're just not having them at all, right? But you're not listening to what they're doing. You're designing from a handbook, from a CIPD SHRM textbook. It's like all you have to do is design it from a human-centered perspective. If you can do that, you will win. It's real simple, but we always seem to default to the qualification. We always seem to default to what's gone before. And I think, to Sam, to your point, and Callie, you said this as well, the time and space to innovate. Well, how you work with your people is just as about innovating as it is you working with your customers. They are both equally as important, but everyone rushes over to the customer stuff because that's where the revenue comes in. Yeah, I lost my way on my soapbox there. I'll step back off it again and let someone else talk.
But I think I went with you on your journey, Toby, on this one. And there's, as you were talking, it also, the thing that bugs me is, why do we make out that this continuous learning has to be an expense and it has to be expensive and you need a piece of paper? Personally, I think that's so outdated. I didn't go to university. My studies came later on in life, and I agree with what some of the more modern universities are now saying, which is we need to go to a subscription model, because no sooner does someone start and they start paying us, actually the course is out of date. So that is something I feel very strongly about, going out and spending an absolute fortune for a piece of paper. I don't have a problem with the investment. What I have a problem with is that this piece of paper says I've done this, because it's all theory. And part of that continuous learning is things that you can put into real day action to make a difference, not only today, but tomorrow. I don't need algebra with what I do. Okay, I know some people might in their roles, but I didn't need it rammed down my throat when I was a kid at school, or a lot of these other things that we were taught, just to say that, we were educated and had an education. And I think part of this continuous learning, what that looks like, is actually relevant continuous learning. I agree with Callie, the word trust is huge. And Toby, what, your take on that whole, it's the employee experience, and the employee experience is just as important as the customer experience. I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. And I go back to Virgin as a great example. It's relevant continuous learning. That's the piece that I think so many companies are missing. Ali?
Yeah. I think it's hard to know what is and what isn't relevant, right? And I think back to, I mean, I went to a liberal arts school, so there's a whole lot of like, there's not a lot of directly applicable information, but what I learned how to do is make connections and bring things together. And that's what we need people to do, is to be able to make connections and say, here's this issue that I see. This is how I can connect that to this other issue, or be able to see the problem that the customer is having and not just say, oh, we don't do that, but then to be able to think critically and to go back and say, I think we can solve it, or this is how we could get close. There's a lot of other things wrapped up in that, right? You have to have transparency about it. Don't, sell someone on something that isn't perfect without them knowing what they're up against. But by creating an environment where people are comfortable being curious, comfortable asking questions, comfortable saying, this is something that I think is going to help me, you start to open the door for those connections to start happening. And that, I think, is part of the thing that we take for granted, to your point, Sam, of prescribing a specific solution, when really what we have to be doing is giving people a tool bank to be able to think critically, make connections, and think about, this isn't working, how do we make this better? Thinking, someone in a customer service support role, maybe it's nice to be able to train them to solve the exact problems of that time, right? But how are you going to have a customer success team that keeps a lasting client, that gets them confident enough to buy on that additional service? It's by having a confident practitioner who is competent and can help to solve the problem that they have, not just the problem that was put in front of them during a training. And that's a lot harder. And I think why it gets overwhelming to say, we should be focusing on comprehensive learning and development for people, or where that continuous learning piece comes in. It comes in for those people who figured out that that's sort of what we need to be thinking about, and not just learning a specific black and white set of data points.
Love that, Kelly. Toby, you had something to say as well, and let's start to wrap this up. I'm conscious of time for everyone.
So I think the long and short of it is, I'm going to use my brother as an example. Works for a prestigious motorsport company, and had completed a degree in engineering. And his HR team, he went to his HR team and said, "I want the next step. What training can you offer? What you can give me?" And they offered him a forklift driver's license training course. And like, okay, this isn't like, how unaware of the world do you have to be to know that that's probably not the right link? And you wouldn't even have to be a rocket scientist or an engineer to figure that out. But also, all you could have done was talk to him and figure out what the next step would have been. So you don't have to be that. It's like, they probably already know, where do they want to go as an individual, and does that line up against your business objectives? It's about those conversations. And I'll say it one more time: a customer success mindset is where you want to be, not a HR or L&D mindset.
I love that. And it's, I think to kind of bring it all together, Toby, you summed it up so beautifully. That kind of, the mindset is so important, and really understanding what that means. Callie, your theme throughout today has been trust, and then connecting the two pieces. And keeping it relevant, keeping up to date. To Toby's point, using your brother in terms of, hey, I've done this, now let's get you to use a forklift truck. It's have the conversation. Trust and communication, two key things that play a pivotal role in all of this, to keep your people relevant and keep your business relevant. Because trust me, if you don't, you won't have a business, period. That's quite strong for me, wasn't it? Anywho, everyone, thank you as ever for listening to us, joining our sessions, giving us your suggestions in between times. We're eternally grateful. Keep your ideas and suggestions coming. So it's bye from me.
And me.
Breakfast has been served.
Woo!
There you go. There's
And
my
on
exit
that-
catchphrase.
On that, everyone, I can't believe you just did that, Toby. On that,